Okay, so welcome everyone. This is the Quant University guest lecture series for the Artificial Intelligence school we are running over the last 5 weeks, and this is lecture number 5. Today, I have the pleasure to invite Christoph from TD Bank, and then Julia, who has been at State Street, and they both are veterans in the model risk space, and they have collectively, I would presume, more than a couple of decades of experience on validating machine learning models and statistical models collectively, because banks don't exclusively work with, either statistical or AI models. So you have a combination of all these. So we thought it would be interesting to bring in the practitioner's perspective in today's session on what does it mean for a large bank setting or any financial institution which is going to be implementing model risk management practices, and then integrate aspects of traditional model risk management, if you will, based on all the learnings we have had with SR 11.7 and many of the other regulatory best practices. But now, how do we factor in aspects of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how do we integrate these workflows? So we have a fantastic panel discussion today, and I'm going to be moderating this session. So we're going to think about what does it mean to talk about model risk management in the context of the past? What does it mean in the context of working through all the regulatory aspects which are happening as we speak, and also incorporating all the technical innovations, and what does it mean for risk management? And then we'll look at the crystal ball and see about what's happening in the future. Just wanted to make an announcement that we are going to have multiple sessions, and I'm going to share some of the things which we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks. Let me just do a quick share of my screen so that you're aware of it. Okay. So for people who are new to this Quant University guest lecture series, welcome. My name is Sri Krishnamurthy, and I run a company called Quant University. We are based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and since COVID, we've been holding these guest lecture series, which brings in people from multiple disciplines, academics, practitioners, and people who are innovating in the frontier areas, as we call them. And we have seen a lot of changes over the last few years, and it's been fascinating to see the adoption of all these newer machine learning and artificial intelligence techniques as we bring them into formal organizations. And we are trying to build out a whole community of practitioners, academics, innovators to see how we can exchange knowledge and also educate ourselves on what should be the way in which we should be adopting these technologies. So in that realm, we run formal courses. We have been running courses for the past 10 years for various enterprises, and we have, if you go to quantuniversity.com, you can see many of the programs we currently offer. Just to let you know, we are having 2 live sessions, one in November and another one in December. The November session is going to be primarily focused on generative AI applications for financial professionals, and the December session is going to be focused on use cases and case studies. So if you're interested in joining in of any of these programs, just send us an email to info@qsandbox.com, and we can relay you to the details. And this is mainly attended by financial professionals in the industry. So it'll also be a good way to exchange ideas as you kind of collectively learn from each other and also learn about the various best practices. With respect to the guest lecture series, today's lecture will primarily focus on navigating the various aspects of machine learning models and AI governance in various aspects. And then next week, we have Uday Kamath, who is going to be speaking on the various metrics associated with large language models. Uday is a prolific author. I've known him for many years, and he is the Chief Analytics Officer at Smarsh, and he recently released a very popular book called Large Language Models, A Deep Dive. It's a Springer publication, and I was fascinated with how much he has kind of covered in one book. And he's going to be doing a masterclass on large language model metrics, because there are so many metrics on how to measure the various aspects when we build out and test these models. So he'll kind of take a formal approach on what are the various metrics you should be looking at when you're evaluating various use cases from a large language model setting. It's going to be an interesting discussion. So please join us next Tuesday. It's going to be not Wednesday. This week we moved it to Wednesday just because we had the elections and we didn't want you to be distracted with all the things which are happening. Now that we have everything settled and you don't have any uncertainty at least in the news space, if you will, we thought we'll kind of move back to the original schedule of meeting every Tuesday. And also, if you are in the Boston area, tomorrow we have the IEEE Global Tech Forum on Artificial Intelligence. That's in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the Microsoft Nerd Center. And it's a full day session on various AI-related topics. And between 3 and 5, there is a session on imagination in action, wherein a lot of innovators and professionals in the area are presenting on various themes. And I'm going to be presenting a topic on agentic architectures and learning, wherein we are building out a platform called as Q-Skill Bridge. We are leveraging various agentic architectures to think about how you can customize learning in various settings. So if you're in the Boston area, you're welcome to join in. It's a free conference. Here's the QR code and the URL so you can register for this particular event. So without further ado, I would like to invite Julia and Christoph to the virtual roundtable / fire chat table, if you will. So welcome, Julia. Welcome, Christoph. I will give you the stage for a minute so that you can share your background and experiences and what you've been doing and what fascinates you. And you don't need to tell me how you voted, but the last thing I would like you to stop at is, did you get your prediction right? Okay, so let's get that going with that icebreaker question, and please introduce yourselves. Well, I wanted to make it a fun question, but it's not going to be without revealing what your choices are. But anyways, let's get going.
Christoph, do you want to go first or?
Yeah, I will start with a quick introduction. So my name is Christoph Rougeau. I recently joined TD Bank as a model risk management executive, and previously I was working at McKinsey, co-leading the model risk management service line. So I've been in that space for more than a decade already. And very excited to be part of this panel. And I know, Shri, our paths crossed many times in the previous year, so happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome, Christoph. And Christoph and I, we've known each other for many, many years.
Yeah.
And, during his McKinsey days too. And we have kind of collaborated on various initiatives, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Welcome, Christoph. Julia?
Yeah, so my name is Julia, and I just left State Street recently as Christoph joined TD Bank. So I have been with State Street for 14 years. First 7 years with the Treasury Risk Management as managing director. And then I moved to the Global Model Risk Management 7 years ago. And the last 4 years, I was the global head of the Model Risk Management, where we have seen a fast increase of use of AIs, and they have been improving and enhancing our model risk management framework. So Sri and I actually, earlier this year ran into each other while we both gave presentation at one of the Professional Risk Management Association Premier. And that's how we got to know each other. And then Christoph, we have known each other for a long, long time, and he has been really helpful to State Street and myself personally. And thank you, and be happy to be here and share my experience from the practitioner's perspective.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julia. It's always a pleasure to kind of meet professionals in the Boston area, and the event Premier and I, we go a long way. Quant University and Premier has a formal relationship, and we do offer courses through Premier. So if you go to the Premier website, you should find the Quant University Learning Center if you're interested in learning any of our courses. But I was always fascinated with all the things which are happening in the model risk space and as a third-party independent validator, but also having kind of, track what's actually been happening over the last many years. It's always interesting to see what makes sense to adopt now and what needs to just be thought about as well. We got to put the ears to the floor and just be aware of what's happening. So with that, let's get started. How have you seen model risk management evolve over the last, let's say, the last 5 years? With all these new technologies, what are the changes and what are the things you're seeing? So maybe you can both take your perspectives and then we can kind of, take other questions we have.
Yes. So why don't I go first from the practitioner perspective? Just as a disclaimer, and all the views expressed by me here are personal views, and I just want to disclaim that it does not represent any views from any financial institutions. So in the past 4 to 7 years, I have worked in model risk management function and leading the function. And what I have seen, obviously, particularly in during the COVID, we have, as a model risk management function, we have started from COVID, we have seen lots of changes and lots of challenges per se. COVID, Ukraine war, and inflation. And among these, I think the most recent one was the emerging new technologies. And so from the practitioner perspective, what we have experienced was obviously the first thing that happened was the regulatory actions, right? Our regulators were on top of the things. And as these events unfolded, as the new technologies, emerged, that we have, much more interactions with the regulators. They wanted to understand our actions and to be taken. They want to provide some guidance to us as well. And globally, from the regulatory perspective, we have also observed, the UK and Europe and some other regional regulatory authorities, they have introduced a lot more regulations and offered much more clarity on how we might oversee these emerging technologies. And in response, the model risk management function of the banks, and we have focused on enhancing our model risk management framework. When COVID happened, obviously one of the things that we applied was, one of the things that we enhanced was how do we overwrite these models, and so there was a big push. And when the new technologies emerged, the first question we asked was our model risk management framework adequate? What are the unique aspects of these AI and Gen AI, and what are the things we have to enhance, right? So we did kind of self-assessment, and what it turns out as the Gen AI, happened 2 years ago.
I'm sorry, please continue. Yep.
Yeah, and we recognize, there are areas that we need to focus. For instance, ongoing monitoring. Just given the nature of these dynamic updating of the Gen AI, explainability, and a lot of these things that I won't touch upon in your first question. Right, and I think definitely we spend tons of time trying to enhance our model risk management framework. And then third change that, just within the model risk management process, we spend a lot of time just asking ourselves, how do we achieve efficiency, right? Operational efficiency, because with these new technologies comes the challenge. Our model risk management framework was built, I'm sure across the industry, was built more than a decade ago under the assumption, our models have a long development and deployment cycle, right? But it's no longer true. And we have observed our first line, the business or the technology teams, they are trying to enhance the technology built ecosystems to speed up those development cycles. And so a lot of actions have been taken by the second line, the model risk managers, to look into the technology space and thinking about, automation, think about what are the technologies available, whether we build in-house or whether we acquire from vendors, right, to automate our process, to streamline process, or to train our employees. And three, as you mentioned, you're building something, to provide the training platform, right? So I think that is also something that, from the financial institution perspective, that those are the changes that we have experienced.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you for the comprehensive overview. I know, Christoph, you have a dual perspective on this topic, because since you mentioned you are recently at TD, but prior to TD, you have kind of worked with multiple customers wearing a consultant hat. So you have seen multiple organizations adopt these practices in different ways. In many areas, you have provided oversight plus advocacy on what are the best practices. So what is your take on this aspect of how you've seen model risk management over the last few years?
Yeah, and I will use the same disclaimer. These are my personal views and not necessarily the one of my current or previous companies. I do agree with Julia, right? During COVID, what we have seen, it's in that acceleration of digitization program, and that led to an increased use of AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what it meant for model risk management is really rethinking their capabilities, because they were two impact. One, actually three even. One is, new type of algorithm that had to be reviewed and challenged, right? A large variety of use case. We are not talking anymore about predictive modeling, but we are also covering now, solution used to improve customer experience or improve productivity. And this is quite new for MRM function. And the third one, I think, for competitiveness, there were more and more questions around speed to market when it comes to AI. So that led MRM to evolve, right? And I see it really in two phases. The first phase is within model validation, really to build dedicated capabilities, right? Dedicated team of data scientists, having the right set of procedure and tool to be effective in the activities. And the second phase that I've seen over, let's say, the last 2 years, and this was triggered really by Gen AI, is not thinking anymore as model risk management only, but really wearing this risk management hat and look at the risk holistically as a second line, right? And ask ourselves the question, is it sufficient to assess model risk, or should we consider other type of risk like people risk, sustainability, technology, third party, etc.? And that comes with quite a lot of complexity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, those are excellent points. We have seen this, tectonic shift, and I was actually seeing some of like the news items today, and there's this new company called Perplexity, which is, similar to ChatGPT and other platforms, which is enabling people to kind of ask questions and search and get consolidated answers rather than just, raw search results like you would use on Google. And there was a note that, with the New York Times strike going on, they are potentially suggesting use of Perplexity to augment work, to do creation of new things. So, I mean, it's a new use case, but also you can see that, the knowledge worker, if you will, is probably either going to be replaced or will have a lot of augmentation with tools they can potentially use to increase their productivity. So with that, what are the use cases, like especially in the AI world, you've been seeing, which are of interest for organizations like the ones you've worked in? You don't have to give the specifics, but the kinds of applications you're seeing on the AI front. And you can wear your risk manager hat, or you can also wear your innovator hat on things which you have evolved within your practice to make life simpler. I've seen some companies use AI, which in fact we are also building a tool, and we demonstrate that as a part of our training programs on expediting generation of reports or reviewing reports or learning from past reports and also collecting and summarizing trends. If you have, basically run models and created reports, and you have a whole library of reports for a particular model to just see, how has the model evolved and what are the issues, how have those evolved, and leveraging large language models to do those kinds of summarization. So we are also innovating on various fronts, but I'm just curious to hear from your perspective, what are the kinds of innovative use cases you're seeing within the enterprise?
I think we are seeing quite a lot of impact when it comes to automation of operation, right? And from my perspective, that makes the role of model validation even more interesting because you can really measure the impact in terms of efficiency or dollar amount or capacity saving when you identify, let's say, an error during your reviewing challenge. So there is this one category. The second one is thinking in terms of like having an agent or a support function, right? So for instance, we see that in marketing, right? Some of the tool being used just to assist in the marketing campaign and specifically, what are the key messages you want to bring, generating certain image for targeted population. It's not yet in production, but these are things that I've seen across industry being explored. And then there are what I would call the funny cases, right, that are more under an exploration, right? Like for instance, I've seen recently AI used in the form of a robot just to guide employee to sort waste, right? And frankly speaking, as an MRM function, that raises interesting question, right? Do I need to validate that independently? What is truly the risk if there is a problem, right? Of course, there are ESG consideration, but just to consider holistically this use case, right? That illustrate as well the type of challenges or questions that are raised by MRM functions.
Awesome. Juliet, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, be happy to add. So, from my perspective, this is pre and after I left State Street. I have seen some really interesting cases where the AI was used to generate fundamental investment research for hedge fund, for example, right? And which prompt me to think if that AI application can be used to extract the relevant information for hedge funds, then similar functionality can be created to generate risk reports. And then I have been contacted and talk with vendors about Gen AI solutions to automate the model documentation. And there was one company that two companies actually talked with me about automated model validation for Gen AI, and those are very, very interesting.
Automated
Yeah.
validation.
Right. So you can automate development and then you can automate model validation, right? And I have also seen, certain vendor solutions provided to some banks to provide compliance or audit training. We do trainings all the time across, the organization, right? And some teams have been, we have training staff to execute those tasks. And so that's also one application. And then lastly, I have also seen Gen AI application by certain bank to, generate trading strategies or to read legal contract. Which typically take hundreds of thousands of hours, but now it only takes a few minutes. So those are really, I think, kind of the eye openers for me.
Absolutely. And this brings an interesting question. There are, in the past, when you think about data science workflows and model workflows, I was trained as a quant, and I did my tour of duty at Citigroup as a quant, and 5+ years at MathWorks, I was building quantitative models, and I was kind of deep into data, deep into models, deep into assumptions, deep into, thinking about model validation. But anytime I did it, I had the context of what I was doing. And I kind of see now there are two things happening. One, there is this abstraction layer wherein you don't need to know about the underlying details when you call these models. I mean, when I call ChatGPT, I'm calling this 70+ billion parameter models, but I don't have any clue. I'm just typing it as though I'm talking to another human, and I'm getting back answers and I use it. So there is this, what do you call, everybody is a data scientist kind of a mentality now, wherein anybody can use these to augment or to, get certain workflows done. On the other hand, as a risk professional, I'm having challenges to even kind of build out this boundary of what needs to be validated and what aspects of it can I even say that I have validated it, and I can say that it is safe for use for your particular purpose, both from a specific model perspective, wherein I'm taking a model or taking a particular process and saying I'm validating it, but also coming from the perspective of, am I using it in the right way? That's basically process validation, saying, I can say that if you use this model in this particular way, which I have validated, you should be fine. But if you are using it for other extraneous use cases, I'm not sure we can say that that output is going to be, well, you mentioned legal contracts, right? If I basically put in a clause saying that, by the powers bestowed to me by my IT department and the tools they have provided to me, I reviewed the summary, the 3-minute summary, and I vouch that this 3-minute summary, is good enough, and I sign off, versus me saying I have vouched for the entirety of the document, and I'm signing off on the entirety of the document, right? So it's a long-winded way of kind of getting to this question. How are you communicating, or how is communication happening between model risk management teams and end users? And the reason why I mentioned both end users is, one, on the modeling side, the data science and the AI teams who are building out these models, and they are coming to you saying, validate these models because we're going to make this available to our end users. That's one aspect. But then on the other side, who may be the end users, to set the right expectations on what they should be expecting when these models are given to their hands for specific purposes. So how are you seeing those communications happening? I'll leave it to both of you. I would love to hear both of your perspectives there. And also, just to, for the people who are in the audience, Eric, thank you for the question. We're going to use the last 10 to 15 minutes or so for Q&A. So if you have any questions for Julia or for Christoph, please put that in the chat or the Q&A window, and I will try to see if I can consolidate or see if we can answer as many questions as possible as we get to the end. Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
I can start. So there are two parts, right? What I would call the first line on model development side, and then the user of the AI. On model development, it's for the model development team, right? From my experience, it's really a question to communicate clearly what are the expectations from risk management, right? So on our side, we have, different procedure or principle that needs to be, verified when a model is being developed. And it's key to make sure that people are very clear on what needs to be, need to be considered, right? And that comes through the form of often of training, right? But also showing by example, especially in areas where, the data scientist team are interacting with model validation for the first line, right? So a big part is just education. For the user, to me, it goes back to the question of being transparent on the limitation of AI, right? And by being transparent, I mean two things. One is laying out all the key limitation, right? The most material one, but then documenting that in a clear manner, right? Because the user is not necessarily technical, so you need to translate that into a language that is understandable by anyone, right? And also give a bit of color on what could be the implication, right? If it goes wrong or if they go beyond the boundaries of the approval from validation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Julia, you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. On the education, I think that was a really good point, right? Because Gen AI was rolled out, or even before it was rolled out, I think there was a general interest about what is that? How can we use it, right? So I think the organizations, the first thing that needs to do is to, educate the broader audience, and this starts from the board, the executives, and the employees, right? Host these learning sessions about the AI uses. And, I'm sure all the organizations have done something similar, hosting these talks, and you might guess, talking about the benefits of the AIs and what and how we can use AIs for. And as the conversation, goes naturally, the conversation month over month will become, and as we have observed, employees started to ask about the AI risk. How do we govern it? How do we, make sure we can responsibly use it? So those are kind of the conversation, I would say, educational conversations that we lay the groundwork. Right. And I think, from the governance perspective, what we typically do as banks is we also look at the kind of the best practice across other organizations across the industry. So we engage consultants, we have conversation with regulators, and kind of benchmark ourselves, and against others, and communicate those information to the non-technical executives. And that's important because the tones are usually set at the top of the house, right? And to also Christophe's point, we bring all the business partners, whether it's IT development or our users, we bring them all together and showcase and how we can use the AIs. And during those live sessions, you can also showcase what are the risks, and just by error and trial, right? And that will really give our non-technical audience a good understanding about what the risks of the AIs. And lastly, I would say always as risk managers, we study every single case, right? That's public out there. What's wrong with AI? What was illegal? The consequence of those, and bring those cases to the stakeholders and, share them candidly with everyone. And I think that's kind of the general approach that we took.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm just going to combine a question because it's kind of the next question I wanted to ask. And Abhinav also has a question, with respect to SR 11.7. So we had SR 11.7 for traditional model risk management, which gave us a nice framework on how to work with different kinds of modeling related issues and documentation and process and vendor management and everything. Now, how are you seeing the whole profession evolve, and how are organizations coping up with the new influx of AI related practices? Are you seeing more in the context of let's just build upon what we already have? Are you building specific workflows for AI specific validation processes? I just want to understand, like, how is the MRM department gearing up towards newer models and evolving practices in the AI space? Maybe Julia, you can start, and then Christophe, you can add to that.
Yeah, sure. So the background I would say of this is, banks actually have very mature risk management framework, and for decades, right? And all the banks are required by the regulators to set up the 3 lines of defense, right, with the roles and responsibilities, and with the process set up in compliance with the regulation. And I would say these frameworks that the set up by the banks traditionally are technology neutral and risk-based, and they are frequently updated to reflect the emerging risk.
Mhm.
Right. And so in the case of AI, frankly, when EU AI Act was rolled out, it was not a surprise, from the model risk management perspective, because under the SA 11.7, which we comply with, we assess the risk by model use, right? So my point is the AI risk is new, but it's not that different from the rest of the risk. So banks, from what I have seen, banks have been using AI technology for years, and there are two things that the banks have been two actions that banks have taken in order to address the AI risk. One is what Christoph has alluded to at the beginning, was instead of being taking being one of the risk management disciplines, right? The banks need to the model risk management needs to be part of the actions taken by the bank to break down the silos and promote the enterprise-wide AI governance. So what that means is, the model risk management needs to work with other risk disciplines, namely cyber risk, third-party risk management, and data governance and legal and compliance, right? And collaborate with all these functions and create a holistic view. And everyone has a seat at the table, right? And at the top of the house, it creates some governance committees and creates the governance structure that clarifies roles and responsibilities and policies to govern it. And then the second thing that the banks have been doing is really expand the model risk management framework itself, right? And things that I have mentioned, the ongoing monitoring and explainability and some testing metrics, right? And robustness testing. There are things that, we even the definition itself, right? And make sure that these expansions can adequately cover the uniqueness of the Gen AI risk. Yeah.
Absolutely. So Christoph, if I could just just channel that question specifically in the context of, I mean, there's always this challenge of too many cooks spoil the broth kind of a thing, right?
Yes.
So when you think about a committee-based decision and you bring in multiple perspectives to the room, everybody will be looking at it from their perspective. And many a times those, what you call consensus, aiming decisions are not optimal. I mean, when it was like MRM, model focused, we are the gatekeepers of the model leaving the door. You basically own the responsibility of making sure that the model actually serves the purpose, fit for use. Now, with all the other aspects, like third-party aspects, cyber, IT, there's a lot of technology-related risks associated with that. Model risk is probably going to own the what do you call, the responsibility, but may not have the authority to dictate terms on other groups, like saying what cyber should be doing or what IT should be doing, or what if you say, hey, this third-party vendor should be disclosing these things, otherwise we cannot let the model to be used. But the business user is like, hey, I don't need all these things. I just need to use that particular product, and all these other companies are using it. I want to use it too. And how do I kind of build that, what do you call, consensus within the organization, but also make sure that you're building a formal process rather than triaging it on an ongoing basis whenever new things kind of come in?
Yes, this is a very good question. And perhaps, Shri, I will just come back quickly to something Julia mentioned, because I think it's very important. I do agree, bank didn't wait the EU AI Act to build their capabilities, right, on AI model validation, right? And on a side note, I do think that there are good learnings from banking that non-financial institution could benefit from, right?
Mhm.
Or often see a lot of discussion, people trying to reinvent the wheel, while actually in my opinion, the most mature practice are in banking, right?
Yep.
Now, to answer your question, this is a complex problem, right?
Right.
There is a question on where should AI risk management reside, right? And there are different archetypes. Sometimes it's within MRM, other time it's elsewhere. And frankly speaking, depends where the capabilities are within the institution. Now, how to coordinate all that, that's precisely the role of the AI risk management team, right? So it's important, one, to be aligned on who are the key stakeholders from the second line. What are the risks we want to cover as an organization? And that's part of the discussion around responsible AI principle, laying out the AI risk taxonomy and getting alignment, right? And from the very top, right, should come from the CRO level. Once there is alignment, it's definitely, designing clear processes, right?
Mhm.
And to me, there are really two aspects here. One is thinking in terms of workflow, right? Because you still need input from different second line to conduct, for them to conduct respectively their risk assessment. So cyber risk team or technology team to assess security risk. But you don't want that necessarily to increase significantly the time to market for the AI deployment into production. So there is a need to think about a smart way to combine all the different views.
Yep.
And the second one is once we have the view, let's say across the 6 or 10 risk stripe, how do we conclude, right? How do we say, okay, this AI is approved or is rejected, right? What is the weight that we give to each of these risk dimensions, right? Are there some risks that are more important than other or not? And that goes back from my perspective to the question on, AI risk appetite.
Mhm.
And really for the institution to understand, okay, where do they want to focus? What are the boundaries, off limit, use case, and just where do they put the weight, right? And it can differ depending on the type of use case, etc. But it's mostly a question of AI risk appetite.
Mhm. Interesting. Interesting. So yeah, I mean, we touched upon this a little bit about the education aspect of it. Uh, both on the development side of things, on what they should or they should not be considering when they are bringing in new components into the workflow. I mean, we had a roundtable last year with another company called Troyera, and it was fascinating when we saw the discussions in the room because a lot of companies were experimenting with, GitHub Copilot for development, right? So, which is primarily to write code which you probably would take, hours and hours to write, and you creating the first draft of the code and then tweaking it to make your application work. And that's the use of AI. And now these will be going into, processes. These will be going into workflows. These will be not formally models. You're not deploying models, but you're taking the outputs of these models, which is code, and you're going to be executing and integrated with human written code. Another classic use case is if there are third-party vendors who are, using AI to either create alternative data sets, and you're using those alternative data sets for your workflows. So it becomes another factor, if you will. It may not be the specifics, but in those cases, you probably need some kind of vetting on the data generation process, the data collection process, and the way it's actually done, but some of it could be secret sauce and they may or they may not be revealing it. So there are like aspects on the development side of things wherein you got to be aware. And then on the user side, I mean, when I teach courses, and we in fact did a whole training program for the entire organization, starting from the head of AI governance to people who are actually implementing it. And the goal of this education was to give them the core aspects of what does it take to build a model, how do models actually get built, and what are the various facets in which you could potentially look at validation and then build out the whole thing. And it was a 6-month program, but over 6 months, we kind of educated them on the various aspects of articulation of risk, the various things which had to be done, but also the terminologies which are being done, which are being used in the industry, right? And it was fascinating to see different perspectives, because some aspects people are technically savvy and they're like, oh, we know that, we can actually use it. But then on the business side, like, whoa, I have no clue what you're talking about, but I want to use it, and tell me what I should be using it for and what I should be aware of. I know it's not going to be 100% accurate, but what should I be watching for? So there are all these like complexities in even education. So how are you seeing organizations build out those internal and the external capabilities of understanding the core aspects of these systems, both from a design and implementation and usability perspective, but also contextualizing it to your internal use cases? So those education could be formal, those could be informal, but how are you seeing companies adopt these technologies? And just to qualify that, like when we work with organizations, we see this whole spectrum of use cases, right? Some of them are in the proof of concept phase, and then they need a subject matter expert to come in and validate those proof of concepts, saying, can we actually do this? On the other hand, you have people who are actually taking these proof of concepts, which has been provided by companies, tied them together, and now they are thinking about like, well, how do we deploy this? Or will it be okay if I deploy it in a particular setting, right? So how are you guys thinking? And you may not be specific about your prior experience within your current companies, but in general, how are you seeing companies adopt these aspects within their workflows from an education perspective? And also just the audience in this room, and also the audience we'll share this with, there's this huge appetite towards learning about these programs and learning about the formalities of model risk management. So they would also be interested in kind of upskilling themselves to get into these roles. So you can also look at from their perspective of what they should be learning before they can even get into the industry for these kinds of roles. Yeah.
I can share my perspective on that. To me, the answer is really to have training that is tailored to what I would call group of stakeholders, right? Like the complexity with AI is there are so many stakeholders involved, right? And with very different background. Just to give you an example, right? Like when you onboard a third party, for a vendor solution, right? First, it might seem that, there is no model or statistical approach, or maybe there is a statistical approach, but it's not AI, right? But if you don't lay out clearly through a training, through communication, what you define as AI and what are the implications, you might end up with a situation like what we are hearing a lot in the industry, which is shadow AI, right? So AI that is used across the organization, but model risk management is not even aware of it, right? So that's one example. The other one that we talked about earlier is, explaining in a clear manner to users, right, what could be the risk limitation of AI. And this might be less technical than a training for the development team, right, where you will focus more on technical aspect and expectation from second line from risk management for their development process, right? So all that to illustrate that, as part of change management and creating awareness, you definitely need training. That's high level answer. But if we go to the details, it's really tailoring that by key group of stakeholders, right? Depending on what are the risks that they can face or create in their activities.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Christoph. Julia, do you have any thoughts on that?
Just one thing to add, when it comes to, the training of our own staff, right? So, really we hire quant, but when we hire quant, looking for quant who also have good sense of the business, and communication skill. And, we can have the training, comes to the risk, and also the model limitation. And this is where the model risk management function, these risk managers can play a really important role, right? Translate what we have seen technically into with our business users, and really, hold their hands and in each of the use cases. I think, model risk management in the future, I see it plays a bigger role in that sense. Not models, but engage in play a role, right? Because we have a mature process, we have the system to inventory these AI models, and we validate, identify
Your
limitations.
network is cutting off for some reason, Julia. I don't know if you're hearing that to Christoph. Some of the words are cutting off. Yeah.
Right. So identify limitations and perform ongoing monitoring. So on top of the house, right, the model risk management, on top of the house view of the in the future down the road, model risk management may be able to identify these concentration risk for the organization, right? And not just individual employee or users, but for the executives, for the board as well. And so I think there's more communication job for the model risk managers to do.
Cool. Thank you. So I think we are going to be wrapping up. Before we wrap up, I would like to just bring Eric's questions, and either one of you can answer it. So we talked briefly about like the summarization use case, right? Like, summarizing certain kinds of things. So the question, I'll just generalize it, like, how do you define completion of a validation for a summarization use case, if you will? What accounts for like, okay, we have validated this use case and you can use it. I don't know if you had any specific thoughts on that.
Well, it depends on, and is it summarized into words or is summarized forms, right? And if it's summarized into table forms, you can definitely have testing performed, the false positive, the confusion, perform. And also, I think one important aspect we probably didn't touch upon is the human in the loop. We can ask the humans to grade those summarization as a summation, right? And grade the performance of these models.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we should start wrapping up. I know I have a lot more questions to answer. We printed out a whole series of questions. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to go through all the questions. But this has been a fascinating discussion. I really appreciate you taking your time to, have your thoughts for the panel and for the audience, if you will. And also people in the audience, thank you for joining us today and sharing your questions and also being interested in this topic, because this is an evolving field and these are the kinds of conversations we need to have, bringing in the old and the new, right? Like, we have a traditional formal process in the banking industry wherein we know how to do it in a particular way. And we have built out the infrastructure, we have dedicated resources who have been allocated those responsibilities. And now we have these new technologies coming in. So rather than building everything from scratch, we may have to start building out things which augments what we already have. That way we can expand what we already do and we can reinforce our best practices. But in addition to that, I think one of the challenges I personally have, I was taking the train into Boston today and I got out of the train and a student of mine, and I teach at Northeastern University, a student of mine, greeted me. And the first question I asked him was like, when did you take my course? I don't remember seeing you. And he said, I was in your class last summer. And I was like, oh yeah, now I remember it was last summer. But since last summer, I've thought, the spring semester, the another fall semester, and another summer semester, and now I'm teaching another fall semester. So within 4 semesters, there have been more than 300 students I've seen. And as I was talking, I was seeing like there's so much change I've done to my curriculum because of the changes which has been happening in the industry and the number of use cases, and just talking to this person on what they do for work. It was just fascinating because they are looking at the cutting edge technologies from an engineering perspective on the tooling, if you will. And all these agentic architecture discussions which we are having today in the industry, and those will come into the financial industry as either tools or packaged aspects of services which probably will be using those tools behind the scenes. So there's so much to learn about what's actually happening. And as risk managers, we don't have what you call the bandwidth to basically say unlimited time, budget, and resources. We can go and learn everything and then kind of adopt it within the industry. So the more we can think about it as a management exercise, management is all about optimizing resources, right? So you are basically thinking about, well, where do we put in the time? How do we create the structure? How do we create those replicable workflows? That way we can ensure that as fiduciaries, we are doing our due diligence whenever we bring things into the process, but also being aware of the competitive landscape which is out there so that you are not kind of hindering the adoption of novel and productive technologies within the enterprise. So that tug of war is a constant one. And I hope, these kinds of discussions and, bringing in this cross-pollination of thinking and thoughts will help us kind of, crack the code, if you will, and at least set us towards the next generation of practices, which will hopefully be, robust enough to kind of, adopt these technologies in a more responsible way. So with that, I really appreciate again your time, Christoph and Julia, for spending with us. Thank you again, and I'll be sharing the lectures. And we don't have lecture slides, but I'll be sharing the lecture recording with all the people in the audience and also people who have registered for this webinar. And next week, as I mentioned, Dr. Uday Kamath from Smarsh is going to be doing a masterclass on LLM metrics. So if you're interested in just using large language models, but also interested in understanding what metrics you should be tracking. So we'll have a fascinating session. It's going to be a little more theoretical, but it gives you the nuts and bolts on what you should be understanding as you build this out. And also, if you are interested in any of our courses, we formally offer through Quant University and certificate programs. Check us out at www.quantuniversity.com. With that, we'll adjourn for the day. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.